This record begins with a field journal, recovered during a spring patrol, found on a shelf beside a radio. The location was Station 14, on the northern ridge of the Mid-Atlantic Highlands. The station door was closed, the interior was orderly, all issued gear was present. The journal entries are dated in procedural, weather, supply counts, repeated radio checks. The final page carries a date, December the 23rd, 1996. The page shows deep impressions, no ink, no graphite. The stove was cold. The firewood matched an earlier count. No fuel was used after December 22nd. The record continues. The conditions do not. The Mid-Atlantic Highlands comprise a series of plateau systems extending across portions of western Maryland, eastern West Virginia, and southern Pennsylvania. The region sits between 2,400 and 3,200 feet in elevation. Access is limited to unpaved Forest Service routes, several of which require seasonal closures between November and April due to ice accumulation and erosion risk. The nearest supply station is 43 miles from the primary monitoring point. Cell coverage is absent above 2,600 feet. Terrain consists of sandstone ridges, mixed hardwood forest, and shallow stream valleys that drain into the Potomac watershed. Winter temperatures regularly fall below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Snowpack can exceed 30 inches during prolonged storms. Visibility is frequently reduced by fog that forms along the ridgelines and settles into the valleys for days at a time. The area has been part of the National Forest System since 1938. It supports limited recreational use due to trail conditions and distance from population centers. Fire suppression records from the 1960s note that ground crews routinely lost radio contact with dispatch when operating above certain elevations. The Forest Plan classified the zone as low-impact backcountry in 1982. A small number of fire observation stations were maintained until the early 1990s, when satellite monitoring became standard. Most structures were decommissioned. A few remained in service as administrative checkpoints or emergency shelters. In December 1996, a forest warden was assigned to conduct a winter inventory of 2 decommissioned observation posts along the northern ridge. The assignment was routine. It involved checking structural integrity, noting wildlife activity, and documenting snow conditions for the seasonal report. His journal was recovered 4 months later during a spring patrol. It was found inside one of the observation posts, placed on a shelf near the radio equipment. The warden was never located. December 8, 1996. Arrived at Station 14 at 13:40 hours. Road conditions poor but passable. Snow depth approximately 18 inches at base, deeper along the ridgeline. No fresh tracks observed on approach. Structure is secure, window seals intact, stove functional. Radio tested, no response from dispatch. Expected at this elevation. Will attempt contact again tomorrow morning. Temperature is 12 degrees, clear skies, wind steady from the northwest. December 9th, 1996. Conducted exterior inspection at first light. No visible damage to roof or support beams. Shingles intact. Shutters need minor adjustment but are operable. Snow accumulation on the north side is heavier than anticipated, approximately 24 inches against the foundation. Cleared access to the storage shed. Firewood supply is adequate. Radio check at 0800, no contact. Will continue as planned and attempt again this evening. December 10th, 1996. Moved to Station 22 at 09:30 hours. Route took longer than estimated due to drifts across the access trail. Visibility reduced by fog in the lower section. Station 22 is in similar condition to Station 14. Minor rust on exterior hardware. Door latch requires replacement. Interior dry. No signs of animal entry. Stove operational. Conducted radio check at 1400 hours. Brief static, no voice contact. Weather holding steady. Temperature 9 degrees. Wind has increased slightly. December 11th, 1996. Returned to Station 14 to complete documentation. Photographed exterior angles and documented measurements for the seasonal report. Snow depth has increased to 26 inches at the base. Fog persisted through the morning. Visibility improved by noon. Observed deer tracks near the south clearing, standard for this time of year. Radio check at 1600 hours. Static present, but no dispatch response. Will attempt final contact tomorrow before departure. December 12th, 1996. Final. Inventory completed. All required documentation is on file. Station 14 and Station 22 are structurally sound and require only minor maintenance. Firewood stores are sufficient for emergency use. Weather conditions are stable. Radio check at 0730 hours. Static only. Departure scheduled for 1000 hours. Snow depth now 28 inches. Temperature holding at 10 degrees. Wind from the north-northwest. December 13th, 1996. Delayed departure due to overnight snowfall. Accumulation reached 34 inches. Cleared the entrance and assessed trail conditions. Visibility is reduced. Fog has returned and settled into the valley. Radio check at 900 hours. Static was heavier than previous attempts. Dispatch did not respond. Will monitor weather and attempt departure again tomorrow if conditions improve. Firewood supply remains adequate. Temperature 7 degrees. Orestol, Dam, December 14th, 1996. Conditions have not improved. Snow depth is now 37 inches. Fog remains dense. Visibility is less than 50 feet in most directions. Attempted radio contact at 0800, 1200, and 1600 hours. Static is present on all attempts. No voice contact established. Trail access is not safe for travel. Will remain at Station 14 until weather clears. Firewood consumption is higher than anticipated, but supply is still sufficient. Temperature 5 degrees. Wind minimal. Barsi Cestas. December 15th, 1996. Fog persists. Snow depth unchanged. Radio checks at standard intervals. Static consistent. No dispatch response. Visibility remains poor. Conducted interior maintenance to pass time. Adjusted stove ventilation. Organized supply shelf. Documented remaining firewood. Approximately 12 days at current consumption rate. Temperature 3 degrees. Wind negligible. No wildlife observed since December 11th. Oreskau. December 16th, 1996. Visibility improved briefly in the afternoon. Fog returned by evening. Snow depth holding at 37 inches. Radio checks yielded the same result. Static only. Firewood supply is sufficient for another 10 days. Temperature 2 degrees. Conducted another exterior inspection. No structural concerns. Cleared snow from the roof access. Wind has shifted slightly to the east. No change in weather pattern observed. December 17th, 1996. Conditions remain unchanged. Radio contact still unsuccessful. Static is constant. Visibility fluctuates between 20 and 60 feet depending on the hour. Snow depth stable. Firewood supply adequate. Temperature 1 degree. Conducted equipment check. Radio is functional. Antenna is secure. Transmission is clear on my end. Dispatch is not responding. No explanation for the extended silence. The journal continued in this manner for 6 more entries. Each one documented weather, radio attempts, and resource management. The tone remained procedural. The handwriting was consistent. No distress was indicated. The final page was dated December 23, 1996. It was blank. But the paper showed deep impressions, as though something had been written with significant pressure. The surface was smooth. No ink residue was detected during the lab review. No graphite, no charcoal. The impressions followed the line structure of the previous entries. They suggested deliberate effort, but the writing itself was absent. The search operation began on April 14, 1997. A spring patrol crew was conducting routine inspections of the decommissioned observation posts. Station 14 was accessed without difficulty. The door was closed but not locked. The interior was in order. The journal was found on the shelf beside the radio equipment. It was open to the final page. December 18, 1996. Radio attempts continue without success. Static remains constant. Weather unchanged, fog dense, Snow depth 37 inches. Firewood supply now estimated at 8 days. Temperature 0 degrees, wind calm. Conducted another review of the radio equipment. All components appear functional. Antenna connections secure, no visible damage. Transmission should be reaching dispatch, no explanation for continued silence. December 19th, 1996. Visibility worse than previous days. Fog is now constant. Snow depth unchanged. Radio checks at 0800, 1200, 1600, and 2000 hours. Static on all attempts. Firewood supply. Now 7 days. Temperature negative 2 degrees. Adjusted stove output to conserve fuel. Conducted inventory of emergency rations. Supply is sufficient for another 12 days at current consumption. No wildlife observed. No tracks visible near the station. December 20th, 1996. Fog has not lifted. Visibility is now less than 30 feet at all hours. Snow depth stable at 37 inches. Radio checks yield identical results. Static only. Firewood supply now 6 days. Temperature negative 4 degrees. Conducted second review of antenna system. Climbed to the roof despite conditions. Antenna is intact. No ice accumulation. No obstructions. Signal should be clear. Dispatch is not responding. December 20th, 1996. Conditions continue. Fog density unchanged. Visibility remains below 30 feet. Snow depth stable. Radio attempts at standard intervals. Static is present. No voice contact. Firewood supply now 5 days. Temperature negative 5 degrees. Reviewed. Emergency protocols. Standard procedure is to remain in place during poor visibility. Trail access is not advised. Supply rationing is in effect. Water source is accessible. Rations are adequate. December 22nd, 1996. Fog persists. Snow unchanged. Radio checks continue. Static only. Firewood now 4 days at current consumption. Temperature negative 6 degrees. Conducted third antenna inspection. All components secure. No damage observed. Transmission is clear. Reception should be functional. Dispatch has not responded in 14 days. No explanation is consistent with standard communication protocols. Weather pattern is unusual, but not unprecedented for this elevation and season. December 23rd, 1996. The final dated entry was followed by the blank page. The impressions were visible under angled light. Forensic review noted that the depth of the impressions was consistent with firm, deliberate pressure. The spacing matched the line structure used throughout the journal. No writing instrument was found at the station. The warden's issued pen was located in his jacket pocket. It contained ink. It was functional. The search expanded to Station 22 and the surrounding area. No tracks were found leading away from Station 14. Snow conditions on April 14th showed no evidence of recent disturbance. The trail between the two stations was clear. No equipment was missing. The warden's personal effects remained inside the station. His coat, boots, and pack were present. The stove had been extinguished properly. The door had been closed from the inside. Several explanations were proposed during the review process. The first focused on weather-related disorientation. Prolonged isolation in low visibility conditions can affect perception and decision-making. Extended fog exposure has been documented to cause spatial confusion, even in experienced personnel. It is possible the warden exited the station during a brief clearing and became disoriented before conditions worsened again. Snowfall after his departure could have obscured any tracks within hours. Spring melt and months of exposure would eliminate remaining surface evidence. This explanation accounts for the absence of the individual. It does not account for the presence of his cold weather gear inside the station. The second explanation considered voluntary departure under psychological strain. 14 days of isolation, communication failure, and declining resources can produce significant stress. The procedural tone of the journal entries may have masked internal distress. It is not uncommon for individuals in high-stress environments to maintain composed documentation, while privately experiencing anxiety or panic. The warden may have left the station impulsively, without taking his gear. Hypothermia can occur within minutes at -6 degrees Fahrenheit without proper clothing. Disorientation follows quickly. This would explain both the abandonment of equipment and the absence of tracks if the body came to rest in an area not covered by the search grid. The Spring Patrol focused on accessible routes and immediate surroundings. Terrain beyond the search perimeter is steep and heavily forested. Recovery operations in such conditions are difficult even under favorable circumstances. The third explanation addressed the radio silence. The static reported in the journal entries suggests some level of signal transmission. However, mountainous terrain and atmospheric conditions can create interference that prevents voice communication even when equipment is functional. Temperature inversion layers, common during winter fog, can trap radio signals close to the ground. This would explain why the Warden received static, but no response. Dispatch may not have received his transmissions at all. Alternatively, Dispatch may have experienced its own equipment failure during the same period. Records from December 1996 show no reported outages, but localized technical issues are not always logged if they are resolved quickly. It is also possible the Warden's radio was malfunctioning in a way that allowed transmission but prevented reception. This would create the impression of one-way silence. The fourth explanation examined the journal itself. The impressions on the final page suggest writing occurred, but the absence of visible marks raises questions about method and intent. One possibility is that the Warden used a writing instrument that failed to deposit ink or graphite. A pen can run dry. A pencil can lose its graphite core while still leaving pressure marks. The Warden may have believed he was writing and only discovered the failure after the fact. If conditions were dim, he may not have noticed immediately. Another possibility is that the final entry was written in a substance that degraded or evaporated over the 4 months between December and April. Moisture, temperature fluctuation, and exposure could theoretically remove certain organic residues. No testing was conducted to rule out this scenario. Each of these explanations addresses one or more aspects of the case. None addresses all of them simultaneously. The absence of tracks can be explained by weather. The absence of cold weather gear cannot. The radio silence can be explained by atmospheric interference. The functional equipment and secure antenna cannot. The impressions on the final page can be explained by instrument failure. The deliberate pressure and consistent spacing cannot. One detail resists explanation within the standard frameworks. The Warden's journal documented firewood consumption with precision. On December 22nd, he noted 4 days of supply remaining at current use. The stove was found extinguished. The firewood supply was measured during the search. It matched the 4-day estimate. No additional wood had been consumed after December 22nd. This suggests the stove was turned off on or shortly after that date. The final journal entry is dated December 23rd. If the Warden was present and writing on December 23rd, the station would have required heat. The temperature was recorded as -6 degrees. Survival without heat at that temperature is not sustainable for extended periods. The stove's condition suggests it was not used on December 23rd, but the journal entry is dated December 23rd. Wait still. The Mid-Atlantic Highlands file contains one journal, one blank page, and one unresolved timeline. The Warden's final entry was dated, but not written. The record ends where logic begins to fracture. The Mid-Atlantic Highlands file is closed, but what remains open is the archive. Subscribe Sector Unmapped to access the next video.